Good morning. This is my third video blog. Um, that's Buck. He's licking all of the fur off of his body slowly, one patch at a time. It's anxiety. We've tried pills. We've tried letting him be an outdoor cat. We sent one of our other cats to live with my parents because it kept biting. And you know what? Buck's just gonna be Buck. He's gonna do what he's gonna do. I also have Rowan over here. Come here. Can you get up in the picture? Oh, you can kind of see. Come here. Put your feet up. There. Look at the camera. Hi. This is Rowan. Mwah. She's our old lady. She's 18. Okay, don't step on the keys. Um, she's a good cat. I like her. Also, I'm drinking out of a mug that I made. This has a monster on it. I drew this picture. This is a Minkit. It's from my Land of Sojourniac series. It's a good time. Anyway, I'm taking the day off today because it's my new policy, over the last probably year and a half, that anytime I do like a 1 month writing challenge, I try to take the day after the challenge off, because, burnout's a real thing. So I'm going to be painting today, I think. I have this one in the background you can see. That's dandelion. It's not exactly dandelion, but you know what? It's good. It's good enough. Just got to keep going. So yeah, I spent the morning sitting on the chair, watching the dogs bark at nothing, drinking. I drink this like V8 energy drink. It's basically fruit juice and caffeine. It's pretty good. And Josh and I were talking about politics. He made us breakfast. It was very nice, very relaxing. It's kind of weird right now because there's a lot of like emotionally charged rhetoric in the world. It's really hard for me, like the way that my brain works. I have this tendency to sort of just like outright reject any rhetoric that's super emotionally charged, um, because it doesn't feel rational to me. It doesn't feel real. But there's also this other smaller part of myself that feels guilty because I'm not reacting to super emotionally charged rhetoric. And so it's really helpful to talk to Josh because he has a history degree and he's a nerd and he remembers everything that he reads. And so when you have conflicts and wars and political contradictions and things going on all around the world, it's really helpful because it's not just about what's going on right now, right? And it never is when you have these sorts of big things like with Israel and Palestine or Russia and Ukraine. And so I can sit down and talk to Josh and I can either ask him for sort of like the whole context. So, um, you know, decades and decades and centuries of the relations between these countries and sort of get a more balanced, nuanced perspective. But I can also ask him about really specific types of rhetoric that I find frustrating. Like I saw an Instagram reel recently, and it was a Free Palestine Instagram reel. And the person said, we're not going to stop until Palestine is free. And I was like, I felt a little frustrated by this because these are the same people who also like jumped on the like yelling bandwagon after George Floyd and Ukraine. And one of the things that this person said in their reel was basically like, all of these, people are like, they're all jump on when Russia's attacking Ukraine, but nobody will speak up when it's Palestine. And I was like, I'm sorry, but like the war in Ukraine isn't over. It's still going on. You guys are the ones who have moved on from Ukraine to Palestine. It's not one or the other, it's both. It's both. And saying that the war in Israel and Palestine is somehow more important than the war in Ukraine and Russia, or that the atrocities being committed in Israel and Palestine are somehow more important than the atrocities being committed in Ukraine and Russia. It's like very challenging for me to wrap my head around. And so I have, again, this tendency to sort of reject outright a sort of very emotionally charged rhetoric. But at the same time, I do believe that all of the atrocities that are being committed everywhere are horrible and I want them to stop. And so, um, one of the sort of, this is turning into a longer vlog than anticipated, but one of the sort of intellectual exercises that I like to do in these types of situations where the rhetoric doesn't really seem to match up with the rational understanding of a situation is I do what I call the both and. And I got this from sort of studying and understanding absurdism. Absurdism is a philosophical construct sort of related to existentialism, but a little bit different. So, absurdism, the two main tenets of absurdism, which the concept was developed by Albert Camus, who is a French philosopher from like the 1940s, so right after World War II. And I've been finding his ideas like really useful. Um, so, the two main tenets of absurdism are that one, human beings crave meaning, deeply and inherently crave meaning, and two, the meaning that we crave doesn't exist. So it's obviously the sort of approach to the idea of meaninglessness, that life and everything is meaningless. And so in existentialism, which is similar but different, the solution to this meaninglessness is that you create your own meaning. You find things in life that are important to you. It might be, your kids, or it might be like volunteering for an animal rescue, which is one of the things that I do. It might be your art. It might be creativity. It might be writing books. It might be activism. It might be trying to change the world. It might be participating, whatever, you get it. You get to create your own meaning, you get to decide what that is for yourself. And so, in the face of meaninglessness, you create meaning. And that's how you find meaning, despite the world or the universe as a whole being meaninglessness. Absurdism has a little bit of a different approach, though. Rather than creating meaning, which you can sort of create meaning in a sort of personal context, right? You can create meaning in the sense that you can do things that feel meaningful. But Camus would argue that even if something feels meaningful, it's still meaningless. And so the solution to meaninglessness per absurdism is acceptance. You acknowledge that things are meaningless, but it's fine. Things don't have to have meaning. Despite the fact that we feel this deep desire for meaning, it's okay if things aren't meaningful. And so, how this applies to the world and the situation that I was just describing is that the problem with absurdism is, how is it useful, right? How is it practical? How does it change the way that we think about things or experience the world? How does it help fill the hole, or how does it soothe the desire for meaning? And so the most practical use of absurdism that I've found is what I call the both and, which is that more than one thing can be true at the same time. I can desire meaning and the meaning cannot exist. I can do something that feels meaningful and it can still not be meaningful in the sort of grand scheme of things. I can feel sad about this, but I can also be fine with it. And I can have multiple seemingly disparate experiences at the same time. And this has been one of the most useful concepts, not just in terms of understanding meaning and finding my place in the universe, but also just being able to look at complex situations. Multiple things can be true at the same time. And one of the problems with these emotionally charged rhetoric that you see floating around the internet and social media is that they're often suggest that only one thing is true. And if you don't immediately jump onto the bandwagon of that singularly true thing, then somehow you're a bad person, or you don't care. That's something that's being pushed really hard. If you don't jump on the bandwagon that Israel is evil and Palestine is good, then you're somehow a bad person. And that you don't understand the situation, that you're dumb, that you are evil, you are, supporting genocide. And this happens all the time. It happens all the time, and it doesn't, I'm obviously in the US, but it doesn't matter if you politically lean right or you politically lean left. It doesn't matter if you're even in the middle. These types of rhetoric, it's all around us all the time. But the truth is, and I would say 98% of the time, it is always, always more complicated than people make it out to be. And I find it so frustrating to feel like I'm forced to, align myself if I'm a good person, right? Or if I have a specific set of values. I find it so frustrating for people, influencers, news headlines to sort of tell me that I need to be in this particular bucket, this rhetorical bucket. I have to agree. Oh, another good example is the phrase all lives matter. So obviously the phrase all lives matter was developed in as a response to the phrase Black Lives Matter, right? And what you'll hear is someone will say, oh, Black Lives Matter, and someone will respond, well, all lives matter. And rhetorically speaking, you can't exactly argue with that, right? It feels like you can't argue with it. That's why it's a useful rhetorical device, even if it is technically uh, some kind of fallacy. I can't remember which one. But what you would see is in response to that, people would be like, well, of course all lives matter, but right now we're talking about Black lives. But I ask you, do all lives matter? And this is a really, really, really difficult, complicated question to ask. Because what ends up happening is you have to define what life is. Do all lives matter? So are we talking about human lives? Are we talking about animal lives? Are we talking about plant lives? So if you're saying all lives matter, do you mean that you're also a vegetarian? Do you mean that you're also a vegan, right? Do you kill ants in your house? Do you use pesticides? And how do your own practices align with your actual beliefs and your stated beliefs? But you can even take it further. Like, let's assume that phrase all lives matter means all human lives matter, right? Well, this is a perfect use case scenario for the trolley car thought experiment, right? Okay, so the trolley car thought experiment is this idea that you have a train, it's going down a track, and on the track are 5 people tied up and they can't move, and the train is going to kill all 5 of them if it hits it, right? You have a choice. There's one person, there's like whatever those things where if you pull the switch, it makes the train move to the other track. But on the other track is one person tied up, right? So you have to make the choice. Do you not do anything and let the train kill 5 people? Do you change, do you hit the button and then you become responsible for killing that one person because you made the choice to divert the train onto that other track? Now, this is, in my opinion, kind of a boring thought experiment, unless you change the scenario slightly and you say on one side are 5 people tied up, and on the other side, you hit the button and there's a pedophile, a convicted pedophile on the track. Does that person's life matter? And as soon as you start giving character traits to the people in question, are you comfortable saying all lives matter? Are you comfortable with the idea that, the life of a Nazi matters? People talk about going back in time and killing Hitler as a philosophical thought experiment. Well, doesn't Hitler's life matter if all lives matter? And so you can take pretty much any of these sort of short rhetorical statements that people use to drive emotional responses, and you can just flip it easily and say, but does it? And how do you know? And it's not just a yes or no question. Um, it's a, you know, why? And if you ask why to every single one of these questions, then you start to see the both, and both things can be true. Multiple things can be true. um, like you can be pro-choice and pro-life at the same time, depending on how you define the phrases. And the problem is that most of these phrases are used as dog whistles. But if you don't understand the context and the meaning of what is being whistled, if you're just responding emotionally, immediately without like a full understanding, it's like, what are you committing yourself to? What belief are you committing yourself to? What ideas are you aligning yourself with that you might not know? One of the things Josh has been pointing out is like a lot of people are using quotations from Hamas, which most people would agree is a terrorist organization. They're using statements from this, Hamas, I don't know what it is, some sort of declaration that they wrote, and they're just saying them. They probably have no idea where it came from or what it means, but people are quoting them because it's emotionally charged rhetoric, and it's designed to be that way. It's designed to make you emotionally align yourself with a cause. Um, Realizing now, as I'm saying all this, it's probably going to make people mad. This is one of the things that frustrates me too, because as soon as you try to take an emotionally charged issue and look at it from a philosophical standpoint, or look at it from like um, a rational standpoint, as soon as you start picking it apart rhetorically, then people are like, well, you clearly don't care about these people. But I do. I just want to say that, like, I am so upset pretty much daily right now about the, atrocities that are being committed in Palestine, in Ukraine. And there's like tons of countries where horrible things are happening. I am still really upset about the way Black people are treated in our country. I am particularly concerned about the way we treat homeless people, especially as we go into winter. Concepts of ableism are on my mind all the time, and I have deep emotional reactions and responses. But when it comes to my behavior, and comes to the things that I say, it comes to the choices that I make, I really think it's important to be able to step back and take a nuanced view, and to allow for all of it to exist in my mind, not just, whatever this one particular person believes or this one particular news source. And it's so hard. It's just a really difficult and complicated exercise to allow everything to exist as it is without always trying to put it into these black and white buckets. So apparently this is what I do on my day off. I think about things. I think about philosophy, I think about the world, I think about politics, and I never really come to any solutions about it, about anything. But I care. So I just want to make sure anybody watching this knows that I care deeply. We donate to a lot of causes on the regular. A lot of these types of ideas make it into my work. So I'm a big fan of free thinking, and allowing yourself to explore ideas that the people around you might think are not safe ideas. And I'm a big fan of changing my mind. And so I change my mind relatively regularly. I have processes that I go through, sort of a intellectual scientific method, if you will. And I yeah, I ran out of thoughts for my video vlog thing. So I did wear my earrings today. Did not hit 60,000 words in November, but I did, or I didn't finish my book, but I did hit 50,000. I got my challenge, so I finally earned the earrings that I bought in anticipation. um, so anyway, that's probably more than enough for today. Happy Friday.